these are criminal investigations. That's why you appoint U.S. attorneys. You can do inspector general's reports on things that may have gone wrong. You can do, even if you're not using the IG world, you could do your self studies if you thought it was just maybe we need to change our policies. But you do this when you suspect there may have been some kind of foul play involved, that the government actors were misusing their positions of power in a way that is potentially criminal. Now, again, this is unique because in this matter, again, it's a U.S. attorney outside of Washington, D.C., so they're not in that D.C. world all of the time, that is been tasked with specifically looking at the unmasking. As we discussed the unmasking and when those names were declassified with the dates of the unmasking, just with Mike Flynn. That's what we saw is the snapshot of Mike Flynn's unmasking request. And the final request that we saw that was declassified was the request made by Joe Biden. And it wasn't Joe Biden's chief of staff, so we're not like imputing that to Joe Biden. It literally said Joe Biden on the document. And now we have a U.S. attorney who's being tasked with specifically looking at this issue.
What this breaking news tells me is the significant focus that the Attorney General Bill Barr is putting on this. I mean, you mentioned the 3 U.S. attorneys, but when you take an investigation as comprehensive as John Durham's had been, which is looking at the broader investigation, and within that, the Attorney General finds the need to appoint another U.S. attorney, John Bash, to specifically look at the political operatives that were unmasking. And you couple that, Jordan, with the fact that next week on June 3rd, the Senate Judiciary Committee, the first witness that they're going to have after they issued those subpoenas from Lindsey Graham is going to be the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who, Jordan, went ahead, as you know, and appointed the special counsel, even though we now know from the 302s from the FBI that he knew at that point that Donald Trump was not a suspect. When you look at the totality of all of those pieces, Jordan, what this tells me is that the Attorney General is extremely focused on this. And I've got to tell you, I think there are going to be indictments and prosecutions that come out of this. And specifically, we are going to see the political operatives that misuse their office to unmask.
When you read through the law, unmasking even is allowed, but it's allowed in the same way that classified documents are allowed to be read. And that is, there has to be legitimate national security concerns, but also the person requesting the unmasking has to have a legitimate need to know. There is no way that all of these people in the closing days of the Obama administration had a need to know who they were unmasking, in this case, General Flynn. Part of what went on in the closing days of the Obama administration, they did not think that Donald Trump was going to be the president. They assumed Hillary Clinton would be the president, and none of this would ever come to light. So they really, really were, it wasn't a matter of that they objected to breaking the law or doing something shady. They just figured they'd never get caught.
Take a listen to the Department of Justice spokesperson.
John Durham, as part of his investigation, had been looking at the issue of unmasking, and the Attorney General determined that certain aspects of unmasking needed to be reviewed separately as a support to John Durham's investigation. So he tapped John Bash, one of our U.S. attorneys out of Texas, to do just that. We know that unmasking inherently isn't wrong, but certainly the frequency, the motivation, and the reasoning behind unmasking can be problematic.
You do want to protect sources and methods. So the underlying intelligence reports are the ones you want to be most hesitant to release, and you want to shed the most sunshine on which elected officials were engaged in which type of nefarious activities. Going back to what Wes talked about, why does a deputy mission need to have the identity of General Flynn?
With John Durham looking at this giant now, you realize the amount of people. I mean, if there's 6 Treasury Department officials, the amount of paper you're looking at, and we talk about a lot of the high-profile names. There's a lot of folks in there, too, that you wonder, like, okay, that deputy was also putting in these requests, too. So he wanted to give this specific task about unmasking that happened right before and then, of course, after the election leading up to the inaugural. That comment alone from me, the fact that I can make that comment based on fact that what we know has been already released from the Intel Committee should send shivers down the spine of most Americans. It's why members of Congress came together in a bipartisan way to oppose FISA reauthorization at this point. You realize with the Obama administration, up until the last moments that they were in power, they were utilizing their function of government to undermine the incoming president.